Hi everyone, this is my creative inquiries study, and this is my presentation. So my inquiry question was, how did COVID-19 play such a crucial role in my students' academic development, and how do I, as a brand new educator, help my students? By Andrea C. Wackwitz, a thesis presented to the graduate faculty in the Education Department in partial fulfillment of the requirements for the degree of Master of Education at Carlow University. ED-731 Creative Inquiry. Me. Obviously, my name is Andrea Wackwitz. I am a master's student in early childhood education here at Carlow University. I have been a substitute teacher since the 2020 to 2021 school year. I am a mother and stepmother of 7 school-age children, and COVID-19 impacted our family in various ways, and it started my thinking process into what I could do more. So what led me to my inquiry question? One of the hardest things in the world was watching my children struggle during virtual learning. It was the constant miscommunication breakdowns between me and the teachers and the faculty and the administration. And it just inspired me to want to do more than just be a substitute teacher. As a substitute, you can only do so much. You only have so much sway. You only have so much ability because you're not with those students every single day. You're not their permanent teacher. And it was because of COVID that it really just inspired me to want to do more. And one of the other things that led me to my inquiry question and kind of expanded my thinking a little bit here was thinking about how difficult it was for me as a mother to keep my children on task. I had 7 children, all in the same household, all at the same time, all on computers, all on tablets, trying to do their live lessons and meetings at the same time. I only had 7. Now, imagine how difficult it was for the teacher. So, the first part of my study is the introduction. And basically, in my introduction, I go over what COVID-19 was, how it swept the world by storm, businesses and schools being shut down. Once schools were shut down, virtual learning was instituted among the teachers and students. Virtual learning definitely proved challenging at home for both students, teachers, and parents. Teachers were bombarded with the demand to change their entire pedagogy in less than 2 months' time once the pandemic shut down schools and virtual learning was implemented. And my experience as a parent during the shutdown led me to start asking the questions about what this experience was going to change in our society and communities going forward, and how that looked and how I could make a difference. This picture I included because it pretty much reminded me of what virtual learning was like. Somebody trying to concentrate and then their child being in the background, being a kid, jumping rope, yelling, playing, carrying on. So, chapter 1, I went over virtual learning and its some of its many challenges. Like I said, I had 7 school-age children ranging in grades pre-K to 11th. My kindergarten student struggled greatly. He could not focus on an electronic learning environment no matter how hard we tried. He could not sit still. You just could not keep this child's attention. He didn't just suffer academically, he also suffered emotionally and socially as well. He still, to this day, does not have the social emotional abilities that he should for his age level. At the end of the school year, his academic standards were not met. He could not read his name, he could not write his name, he could not recognize his name, among various other things he could not do. One of my biggest questions of this chapter was why the school was so adamant that I didn't hold him back when there clearly was a deficit. There was a need for grade retention and intervention, and they just wanted to send him along. There was so much breakdown in communication between parents, students, staff, faculty. Virtual learning was definitely challenging and fun for most. Excuse me. Oh my goodness. So chapter 2 of my study was the observations I had on post-COVID-19 classrooms. And one of the things that I included in chapter 2 was the study I read about 5 million students' test scores being compiled and studied and compared to test scores pre-COVID environment. And just there was no increase in their scores at all. It was 5 million students, severe decreases all across the board. And it was that study that led me to thinking about my student teaching experience. I was given students that were fourth graders, and they're generally aged between ages 9 and 11. And they were only performing academically at a first to a second grade level at the beginning of the school year. And upon my arrival, we're barely at a third grade level. How could I help students that were this far behind when my only educational background and experience was from being a substitute? And it was in this chapter that my expansion of thinking really began. I started thinking about beyond an academic standpoint. What about their social emotional delays? Students, they couldn't solve problems amongst themselves. They had minimal to no coping skills. It was like a classroom full of 4-year-olds. And it's not their fault. It was, when COVID shut down all these kids' classrooms, they didn't have the social emotional experience that they needed. The same thing with my son. And then it expanded my thinking even farther in this chapter to thinking about, what about the teacher's mental health? What about our parents' mental health after COVID? And then it expanded my thinking past the teachers and the parents' mental health after COVID from just a United States standpoint. And what about other countries? Chapter 2 was one of my favorite chapters to write. And there was so much thinking that was going on in chapter 2 that it expanded my entire study. One of the things I began writing about the effects that I witnessed with my students. The drops in their student performance after COVID led to a very problematic school year. Essentially, our teachers were expected to be miracle workers. And what I mean here is, take, for example, the 4th grade standards. When my students began this year, excuse me, they were technically 4th graders, but they were only performing at a 1st to 2nd grade level. So how is one teacher supposed to take 1, 2, 3 years of schooling? Oh, technically 4, because you include 4th grade. So there's 4 years of schooling right there. Include that in there. Get them ready for 5th grade. And still have them ready for any standardized testing. Again, one of my wonderful discourses here, Lewis and Caulfield, found that the average student will need the equivalent of 4.1 additional months of schooling to catch up in reading alone, and another 4.5 months to catch up in math. So we already have established that our teachers are trying to teach 4 years. And then we're going to throw in the Pennsylvania Standard of State Assessment in there, the PSSA testing. So these teachers are now trying to get these kids back to where they need to be and trying to get them ready for a state test. So Did virtual learning cause so many schools to shy away from creative or learning with play? This school in particular that I was student teaching at was all scripted, textbooks, worksheets. If it could not be uploaded, there simply just wasn't enough time to do it. So, chapter 4 is where I went over my reflection and everything I learned from my study. And one of the first things that I said in my chapter 4 was, what is creative inquiry? And to me, it starts as a moment or a memory in time, and through metacognitive reflection, deep thought, and sometimes even criticism, becomes something that has a much deeper meaning. Creative inquiry can be compared to the process of playing with a Rubik's Cube. At first, it may seem difficult to solve the puzzle by relying solely on the colors. However, when you realize that there is a pattern that goes beyond those colors, that goes deeper than those colors, you begin to realize that the solution is right there in front of you. And each different color represents a different thought process that expands beyond your initial question, resulting in a deeper meaning that you may not have even known existed. And this is what makes the process of creative inquiry mentally exhilarating. And to help my students as a brand new educator, I need to remain in a constant mindset of being a scholar practitioner, learning from those who have come before me, who have experienced firsthand in what works and what doesn't work, learning and expanding off of one another and applying what we learn to our methods of teaching. So my discourses that really, I felt, helped me expand my study and go beyond my thinking were the discourses that I found when I wrote chapter 2. As I went through various studies and articles on COVID-19, I gradually came to the realization that its effects extended far beyond the classroom, impacting us all in numerous ways. Megan Caulfield, James Solland, and Karen Lewis, I used a couple of their studies. I quoted them a couple of different times throughout my studies. And that's strictly because I found their study for the academic perspectives on COVID-19 in our students to be the most significant. And it was a study that I actually read out of Taiwan, that expanded my thinking beyond, just that process of, well, it affected our students academically. It was that study that made me really open my eyes and go, okay, well, all right, our students, they're socially, emotionally behind, they're academically delayed. What about our teachers? What about their parents? It was because of that one study that I read out of Taiwan that made me remember that not every country is like the United States. There's so much cultural diversity that it needs to be studied how it affected other people. Just for example, in Taiwan, oh my goodness. Their teachers and their culture and their way of life, they all live in one house as a family, is how I read it in this study. And their teachers don't just, have, like a husband and kids, and then they go to work, they come home, and then they make dinner or whatever. No, they don't just do that. When in Taiwan, their teachers aren't just educators. They come home and then they have to do numerous amounts of duties on top of everything that they've already done. So it really expanded my thinking into looking at all of the different things that have happened in these different countries that have affected our teachers, affected our students, affected our parents. And I loved writing chapter 2. Chapter 2 was my absolute favorite chapter to write. So, insights. Since I've completed my study, there have been some things that I have thought about. The pandemic did not just ravage our communities with death and government shutdowns. It rattled and unfortunately caused mass amounts of anxiety and hysteria among our students, teachers, and parents globally. Even though our students are back in school now, we have lost some of them academically, and it's up to all of us as a whole to come together for the benefit of our students. Another thing that I have learned since completing my study is that this will not be the last study that I write, nor will this be the last degree that I earn. My goals and aspirations have shifted since completing this study, and I hope to one day have my doctorate. Teaching is not just something that you do, it's a way of life or a way of being. To be a teacher is to be in a state of constant learning and constantly adapting yourself and your pedagogy for the benefit of your students. To be in a constant state of learning while you are teaching and applying the things that you are learning to that teaching is what it means to be a scholar practitioner. And the more that you learn, the more you are able to help them learn. And when they're able to learn, you are able to succeed. And being a scholar practitioner is, in my opinion, the best and only way that I will be able to help my students overcome the effects of the pandemic. Thank you.